While searching for games to play, I wanted something outside the mainstream. I was tired of seeing the ads, the same copycat games, and school. During that search, I came across a series of games by an indie developer who goes by the name Ray-Kbys. He isn't well known, you've probably never heard of him, and that's less disturbing for you. His games were never released on Play Store. Looking at their content, it's understandable why. How about this? I checked his DeviantArt, and his art was literally deviant. The deeper I looked into his games, the more recurring patterns I began to notice. Some of them were too consistent to ignore. I miss the days when games were just games, simple entertainment. So let's dig deeper into Ray-Kbys' works and examine the evidence. The first game is called Teaching Feeling. It's about a girl who is a slave called Sylvie and was abused by her previous master. After she is passed on to the player, the game places her entirely under the player's control. That's all. So rather than focusing on adventure or mystery, and keep in mind his games aren't meant to be thriller, the game repeatedly revolves around power, dependence, and the player's treatment of Sylvie. Even though the game has elements of an FSW, the very first menu isn't about difficulty. It's about how much itch you want to experience. But that's still not the point now because the content is worse. The side characters are introduced in oddly specific ways, even though those details never affect the story. Also, Sylvie's introduction objectifies her. Instead of referring to her as a person, the broker groups her with troublesome items. The language immediately frames her as property rather than a human being. And this kind of objectifying language continues later in the game. At one point, Sylvie asks whether the player likes voluptuous women, specifically referring to the shopkeeper. Only moments after establishing Sylvie's history of abuse, the game presents the player with an action that allows further abuse. This is no longer just part of the story, it's a gameplay mechanic. And it's even highlighted in a different color, making it immediately stand out to the player. And instead of being a one-time option, the game keeps presenting it over and over. In simulation games, the available choices usually feel like natural alternatives, encouraging the player to think about which one best fits the situation. At first, Sylvie is not used to kindness. She believes it always comes with a price. She even asks, "Please treat me gently." The irony is striking. Moments later, she says she doesn't mind being hurt if it pleases her master. Even outside the major story moments, the game keeps returning to Sylvie's illness, nightmares, and suffering. The game quickly becomes repetitive and painfully slow. You hit bat, chat, hear another sad conversation, then it's "good night, I need to go to bed." The next morning, it's always the same "good morning, master," followed by another hit bat. Even every visit to the cafe plays out the same way. The odd waitress repeats the exact same dialogue, asking whether we are here for two. Also, odd shopkeeper. And whenever Sylvie orders a shortcake or a pancake, she acts like it's the first time she's ever tasted one, as if that memory resets every single visit. This is the game's most iconic scene, but nothing really changes. It's the same static image, and you're not actually doing anything. After a long, hesitant confession, the game immediately jumps to the next scene. The pacing feels rushed instead of naturally developing the relationship. 1 second she's struggling to finish a sentence, and the next second, well, we are skipping this part. Later on, Sylvie tells us that her previous owner supposedly died in an accident, But then she says that not what really happened. Many people apparently had a grudge against him. And just when I thought we were finally getting somewhere with the story, she stops. Then asks this. That's what I've been saying. I didn't play through this route myself. Instead, I looked into what happened into the game's darkest paths. According to multiple descriptions of those paths, Sylvie eventually dies after being subjected to repeated abuse, neglect, and corruption. I keep asking myself one question. What kind of mindset spends so much time creating and repeating corruption and trauma when it adds nothing meaningful to the game? I mean, isn't the game disturbing enough already? Butterfly Affection. The story of this game starts with the player finding a mysterious creature on a street. We've seen plenty of insect girls before, but Ray-Kbys rarely misses a chance to make them crawl. At first, I thought, why does she have to crawl? Then I realized she's in the larval stage, so this one at least has a reason. Her name is Akiha. Interestingly, Akiha and Okiha both refer to butterflies in Japanese. I also noticed a few similarities between the two stories. In both, the protagonist finds a strange creature, reacts with almost no surprise, and simply takes it home. From there, the stories diverge. Since the game never gives him a name, I'll just call him Dean. Dean contemplated whether to take her home or leave her alone. He decided to take her. After observing her at first, she doesn't seem to understand any language, and her face is impossible to read. Then the game introduces activities to do, like bathing her, feeding her, patting her head. At night, he wasn't comfortable enough to let her sleep in his own room, so he left her to sleep on the sofa. A week passed. Dean was doing the same activities before he noticed some changes on her body. She slowly started growing limbs and no longer entirely spineless. She became more active around the house. Dean kept a journal about her development, placing it out of her reach in case she eventually learned how to read. As the days passed, Akiha continued becoming more human, even though her body was still developing in a bizarre way. Her dexterity gradually improves as well. She begins using a spoon, and she always waits for him to start eating first. He isn't sure whether she's simply copying him or making sure the food isn't poisonous, although she still doesn't seem to relax completely when he pets her. He has started picking up vague hints about her mood. Even so, just like an insect, she remains difficult to read. But for now, she can only respond with the same high-pitched ki sound. As Akiha continues becoming more human, Dean decides she can no longer stay without clothes and gives her one of his shirts to wear. Not long after, she begins preparing the same meals she has seen him cook before. Her appetite's still small, but it's clear she's learning through observation. When he returns home, he finds her using the computer. Most of what she's doing seems random. Around this time, her facial expressions also begin to change, tiny signs of surprise and curiosity. She even starts making physical contact on her own, linking her arm with his and offering a gentle smile. Even so, she still can't communicate with words, making her thoughts impossible to read. As she gradually needs less care from Dean, ironically, the more human she becomes, the lonelier he begins to feel. One day, Akiha was looking through a mail order site. She caught Dean's attention and showed him a page. Whenever she stopped on another item, she gave him the same look as before, as if asking for his opinion. After the package arrived, Dean wondered how she could possibly wear the clothes without modifying them. Before he could think any further, she pulled out an old sewing kit. He couldn't sew himself, and he didn't expect her to sew either. She opened the kit and started working. Watching her so skillfully made Dean realize her intelligence had gone far beyond simple imitation. He was now convinced Akiha was at least as intelligent as a human. The next day, Akiha appeared wearing the dress she had sewn herself, with most of her inhuman limbs hidden beneath the dress. She could almost pass as an ordinary girl. It wasn't perfect disguise, but it was convincing enough. Akiha then pointed toward the front door. It seemed she wanted to go outside, but it happened much sooner than expected. This is where the game begins shifting your perspective, leading to the moment when she pulls him in for a kiss, even though she's still learning how human relationships work. For me, this is the point where the game's character writing becomes inconsistent. The gradual development is replaced by sudden shifts in behavior, making Akiha less believable. She found the computer once again, this time looking at more clothes. Whenever she found something she liked, she looked back at Dean, so he decided to order a few more outfits. At the same time, he studied psychology, pet training, child education, and different communication methods, hoping to understand her better. Even simple yes or no questions led nowhere. Maybe she didn't understand, or maybe she simply didn't feel like answering. Her cooking also kept improving, and she even began smiling more often. When she grew more affectionate and sat close to him, he tried creating some distance. For the first time, she showed what looked like anger, sadness, or maybe surprise. He couldn't tell. Although he immediately felt guilty, he convinced himself it was still the right decision. Later that night, she entered his room, stung him on the neck with one of her tentacles without causing any pain, then pulled him in for a passionate kiss before quietly leaving. After that, he realized something had changed. Akiha was no longer predictable. They kissed again. From this point, violence becomes more common. I'm skipping this part. The next morning, he hears Akiha in the kitchen. While trying to organize his thoughts, he opens his journal and is shocked to find two words written in red ink: "Love me." No one else was in the house. He wonders if she somehow wrote it while he was taking a shower or asleep. In the end, he decides that if love is what she wants, then he will give her the love she wants. She smiles, and that's where the game ends. I was intrigued by the mystery at the beginning, but the ending was rushed and disappointing. In the other path of the game, when he rejects her confession, he's terrified. He says he's going to leave the house and call the police. But the moment he sees her, he feels a sudden wave of guilt and confesses his love to her. Just like in the first path. Ironically, he barely reacts when he discovered that mysterious creature. But the moment she falls in love with him, that's when he finally panics. Another game, another damsel in distress. This game follows a bullied girl called Sachi. She was born with a singular eye. Akemi is cheerful and energetic, while Tomoyori has a calm, almost lifeless expression. The player's name is Mamoru, a friend of Akemi and Tomoyori. One day he finds Sachi hiding alone at school, crying after being bullied. Before leaving, Mamoru gives her his handkerchief to wipe her tears. The next day he turns into her again. She returns the handkerchief washed and thanks him for it. He decides he wants to see her again. Now he has an excuse to thank her for washing it. Apparently, a washed handkerchief was all he needed to start talking to her again. Interested in learning more about her, he decided to befriend her. They quietly had lunch together, where he noticed she was always alone. He also realized her body was covered with scars and bruises. Suddenly, something startled her, and she ran away. He assumed she was afraid of him. What caught my attention was that he called her a monster. Then in the very next scene, he called her a monster again. I couldn't help but notice that the mention and the repetition were unnecessary. Later, he told his friends about her. They said they had heard a few rumors, but the only thing they knew for certain was that she was constantly being bullied by another girl. So he decided to find out the truth himself, and his friends offered to help if he ever needed them. He told his friends he wanted to talk to her, and after a bit of banter, Akemi insisted on becoming friends with Sachi as well. She bragged that she could become friends with anyone, even a cat, a dog, or a lizard. The next time they met, they started talking about books. She said she couldn't afford manga, so Mamoru offered to lend her some from his own collection. Instead of thanking him, she kept apologizing, showing just how shy and reserved she was. The next day, Mamoru helped her carry the manga home. During the walk, Sachi kept avoiding people, lowering her head whenever someone passed by, while Mamoru tried to keep a normal conversation going. Interestingly, this is the exact same background used in Butterfly, a fiction game. When they finally arrived, he noticed that her house was modest. A woman, who turned out to be Sachi's aunt, greeted them politely, but her expression felt cold and distant. She told Sachi that she would have to eat alone because she had come home late. Mamoru sensed that something was wrong. After the aunt left, he asked Sachi whether she treated her badly. Sachi denied it, saying they weren't very close. Mamoru wasn't sure if she's being honest or not. On Saturday, Mamoru visited Tomoyori. Tomoyori questioned why Mamoru was going so far out of his way to help her, asking, "What are you trying to accomplish? Do you like her?" Mamoru immediately denied it, but for a brief moment, he found himself wondering the same question. In the end, he pushed the thought aside, deciding that he didn't need an answer yet. For now, he simply wanted to help her. The next morning, Mamoru saw Sachi from a distance and decided to walk to school with her. Along the way, he asked what she thought of the manga. She said that she enjoyed horror stories, but the one that caught her attention the most was about a boy who could see ghosts. Their conversation was interrupted when a girl named Sadukawa Roy appeared. The moment Sachi saw her, she hid behind Mamoru. That was enough for him to realize that this was the girl everyone had warned him about. Later, Mamoru asked Tomoyori what he knew about Sadukawa. According to him, she had transferred to the school 2 years earlier and had a reputation for being aggressive. He then told Mamoru about a fight between Sadukawa and Akemi. Akemi wasn't the type to stay quiet when confronted, so she fought back with everything she got. Although she was athletic enough to dodge most of the attacks, Sadukawa had real fighting experience. The fight eventually escalated to elbows and knees, forcing Tomoyori to step in and stop it. Afterward, Akemi fell into a brief depression. It wasn't just because she lost the fight, it was because she couldn't understand Sadukawa. Akemi always believed she could find something good in anyone and become friends with almost anyone. But Sadukawa was the one person she couldn't reach. It made me remember Akemi's earlier confidence that she could befriend anyone. Tomoyori then gave Mamoru one final piece of advice. Forget about Sadukawa's past. Right now, Sachi is the one who needs help. Just then, Akemi walked into the room completely unaware of the conversation, loudly announcing that she was hungry. After thanking both of them, Mamoru left with a clear goal in mind. Together, they would help Sachi. The next time they met, Sachi smiled a little more and brought her manga. But Mamoru noticed something was missing. "Where is your lunchbox?" During lunch, he ended up sharing half of his lunch with Sachi, even feeding her himself. The game once again describes her acting as meekly. It didn't need to keep putting the spotlight on that trait. Her actions already spoke for themselves. The next day, as usual, Mamoru went upstairs to the first-year classrooms to see her. Just as he opened the classroom door, someone slammed right into him. The impact knocked both of them to the floor, but he managed to catch her before she hit the ground. It was Sachi. That's when he discovered who had been bullying her all along. It was the girl who had taken her lunch the day before. Sadukawa. Sadukawa started mocking him for being a second-year student hanging around the first-year floor. After that, the conversation quickly turned into an exchange of verbal fight, with Mamoru defending Sachi while Sadukawa kept insulting her over and over. Eventually, a crowd of students gathered around them. Since he was the only second-year student there, he figured staying any longer would only make things worse. So he took Sachi and left. Later, as usual, Sachi apologized to him, even though she was the one being bullied. Mamoru later received 2 movie tickets from his mother. He invited his friends first, but since there were 3 of them, someone had to stay behind. In the end, he decided to invite Sachi instead. She hesitated, saying she didn't want to trouble him and needed her aunt's permission. Mamoru asked if her aunt would at least give her money for the trip, but Sachi explained that her aunt didn't really like her, revealing that her mother had passed away a few years earlier after a long illness, and that her father had abandoned them when Sachi was born. She believed her aunt had once cared for her because she was her sister's daughter. But after her mother's death, she seemed to associate Sachi with all of that sadness. Of course, another tragic backstory. Mamoru told her not to worry about the train fare. Surprisingly, Sachi's aunt gave her permission and even gave her money for the trip. Before they left, Mamoru asked if she had a phone. Sachi pulled out an old, worn-looking phone that she barely seemed to use, so he saved his number on it. When he picked her up, her aunt greeted him with the same cold expression as before and told him to bring Sachi straight home after the movie. He agreed. Sachi was wearing a hoodie instead of her school uniform, keeping her face lowered so people wouldn't look at her. Mamoru reassured her that she was with him and didn't need to hide. After a moment, she lowered the hood, but she still kept her head down. They finally went to see the movie together. On the way, they walked hand in hand. Mamoru bought Sachi a phone strap, so every time she looked at her phone, she would remember that day. At one point, Sachi asked why he was always so kind to her. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. She told him that she had noticed he liked touching her scars. She asked him if he would do it. In her own way, she was trying to give something back. Mamoru told her that she didn't have to do that, but he still began running his fingers over her old and new scars. It continued as they walked, still holding hands, until they reached the restaurant. He was still touching the scars when the waitress arrived with their sandwiches and gave him a look. Mamoru's reaction was, "Yeah, I deserve that look." Honestly, the whole scene felt pretty uncomfortable. After lunch, they went to watch the movie. Something stood out to me. Sachi's favorite character wasn't the hero. It was the strange but nice teacher. She started comparing herself to that character. She seems consistently drawn toward unusual characters like the boy who could see ghosts, almost as if she sees herself in them. By the time the movie ended, it was already getting dark. Mamoru remembered what her aunt had said and decided they should head straight home, so they made their way back, still holding hands. Sachi said Sadukawa wasn't bullying her as often anymore because Mamoru was usually around. When she did hit her, it had become even more violent. Still, Sachi said her time with him meant more than all the pain. Later, Sachi overheard 2 students complaining that Mamoru barely spent time with them anymore because of that girl. They were frustrated that he was always with her. Believing they were talking about her, Sachi quietly walked outside. She broke down in tears, telling herself that Mamoru had already done so much for her, and that she couldn't let him lose his friends because of her. Then the self-doubt returned. Who would ever want someone as strange as me, a one-eyed girl? She decided to end their relationship before causing him more trouble. The next morning, Mamoru greeted her as usual, but this time she tried to ignore him. He refused to let her walk away and kept asking what was wrong. Eventually, she told him it would be better if they stopped seeing each other, explaining what she had overheard. Mamoru immediately denied it. He told her that if she meant Tomoyori and Akemi, there had to be some misunderstanding because he knows them well. Sachi then asked the question that had been on her mind all along. Why are you sacrificing so much for me? Why are you willing to get into all these problems because of me? That's when Mamoru finally confessed. He told her that he loved her. After the confession, there was a moment of silence. Mamoru hesitated for a moment before asking if she hated him. A little dramatic, but thankfully it didn't last long. Sachi admitted that she loved him too. On the way home, Sachi asked, "Can I be your girlfriend?" Normally, that's already implied after two people confess their feelings, but considering how isolated and inexperienced she is, the question fits her personality. After that, Mamoru introduced Sachi to his friends. They apologized for the misunderstanding and assured her that they never hated her. From there, the group slowly became closer, eventually deciding to visit a food festival together. Sachi smiled more than usual and once again asked Mamoru if he wanted to touch her scars. This time, she explained that she wasn't doing it just to repay him anymore. She wanted to make him happy because she was now his girlfriend. Mamoru couldn't deny his fascination with her scars, so they moved somewhere private where no one could see them. The scene then focuses almost entirely on him removing the bandages and touching the scars on her face. He even admits that it feels like he's violating her, yet continues anyway. By the end, Sachi asks him if he's satisfied. She tells him that he can touch her scars whenever he wants. I can't believe I am actually analyzing this. To me, this was where the scars stopped feeling like a symbol of her trauma and instead became the way their relationship expressed affection, which made the whole scene very uncomfortable. The strap already worked as a symbol of their relationship. Afterward, they returned to Sachi's house, where her aunt asked Mamoru to stay for a moment. She couldn't deny she had initially suspected him of hurting Sachi because she kept coming home with new bruises and scars. She then explained Sachi's family situation. After Sachi's father abandoned them and her mother later died, her aunt promised to take care of her. However, she unfairly blamed Sachi for what happened and treated her badly. She regretted it, but understood why Sachi no longer trusted her. She also revealed what whenever she asked about Sachi's injuries, Sachi always gave the same excuse: "I tripped." Notice that's exactly the same excuse Sachi had been using from the beginning. She simply doesn't know how to lie. When Sachi returned, her aunt sent her out again to buy some new clothes. Sachi left once more confused, and Mamoru headed home. Something caught my attention. He suddenly says Sachi's aunt is not very clever. I'm not really sure what intelligence has to do with this scene. Sachi joined Mamoru at the festival, wearing her new clothes. Soon, Tomoyori and Akemi showed up, joked around, and had crepes. During the conversation, Mamoru asked if Sadukawa was still bothering Sachi. She said she still couldn't stand up to her, so Mamoru reminded her that she wasn't alone and could always ask for help. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed through the festival. Everyone assumed it was part of the show and continued on, but the sound may not have come from the festival. Somewhere nearby, a container had been hit hard. This suggests that Sadukawa was at the festival too, listening to them. The story then shifts to Sadukawa's perspective. She doesn't hate Sachi because of her eye, but because she's what Sadukawa calls a spineless insect. No matter how much she's bullied, Sachi never fights back, asks for help, or even seems to hate her. Sadukawa had come to see Sachi as nothing more than her personal punching bag. But recently, Mamoru kept getting in the way. Frustrated, Sadukawa decided to stop before she could leave class. She lured her into a secluded staircase where no one would see them and started punching her repeatedly in the stomach. During the beating, Sachi's phone fell to the floor. Attached to it, it was the strap Mamoru had given her. Sadukawa picked it up and was about to smash it. But for the first time, Sachi glared back with genuine anger. She shouted, "Leave me alone already, and give me back my phone." Even when the phone was ringing in her hand, Sadukawa ignored it. Sachi grabbed Sadukawa's wrist and refused to let go. Sadukawa couldn't shake her off with punches anymore, so she kicked her instead. She put far more force into the kick than she intended. Realizing there was no wall behind Sachi, Sachi lost her balance and fell down the stairs. Meanwhile, Mamoru and the others kept searching for Sachi. Since Akemi knew a lot of people around the school, she asked if anyone had seen Sadukawa. One student said she had gone upstairs with Sachi. Mamoru rushed towards the stairs. As he searched for her, he kept calling Sachi's phone. The ringing became louder with every step. The moment he reached the top of the staircase, he saw Sachi falling down the stairs while Sadukawa stood there with her arms stretched toward her. Sachi crashed into Mamoru, but he managed to catch her before she hit the ground, although he hurt himself a little in the process. Mamoru angrily asked Sadukawa what she had done, saying that Sachi could have died. Sadukawa said it was just an accident. Mamoru then noticed that Sadukawa's hand had been stretched out, as if she had been trying to catch Sachi before she fell. He believed it wasn't intentional, but he still told Sadukawa that her actions had been incredibly irresponsible. Sachi finally stood up for herself. She warned Sadukawa that if the bullying continued, she would tell the teachers everything. Sadukawa answered that she didn't have any friends at this school anymore, couldn't stand Sachi, and didn't want her reputation ruined. She said she was going to transfer to another school anyway, adding that her parents didn't even care. Then she handed Sachi's phone back and walked away. A little later, Akemi and Tomoyori arrived. Mamoru explained that Sadukawa planned to transfer schools. Tomoyori pointed out that she had supposedly transferred to this school after another conflict, so he doubted she would actually leave this time. Akemi, determined to help, ran after Sadukawa, with Tomoyori following behind. That left Mamoru and Sachi alone. Mamoru told her that she had changed a lot since the day they first met. Sachi thanked him, saying that none of it would have happened if he hadn't found her. Mamoru then realized they were standing in the exact same place where they had first met. He also noticed that the scars on her face were finally beginning to heal. Sachi asked if he wanted to touch her scars one last time before they disappeared. Mamoru said it was a strange request, but agreed. She closed her eye, expecting him to touch her scar just like before. Instead, he placed one hand on her shoulder, lifted her chin, and kissed her. Ray-Kbys originally wanted this game to be much bigger. He planned a remastered version with choices and additional content, but the original release had to be finished quickly due to time constraints. As a result, the Steam version remains a short linear story with only one ending. According to TV tropes, these scar-touching scenes go beyond ordinary romance and are presented as unusually intimate moments. In the extras, Sachi tells Akemi that Mamoru isn't as affectionate as before. They still spend time together and hold hands, but he no longer touches the scars on her hand and forehead like he used to. Akemi doesn't understand why Sachi would miss that and seems confused by the way she talks about it. Later, after what happened with Sadukawa, Mamoru and Tomoyori continue talking about Sachi's scars. Mamoru brings up the fact that her scars are gradually healing. Tomoyori thinks that's obviously a good thing, but Mamoru hesitates and says he wants to say something that will probably sound strange. Mamoru confesses that Before Sachi's scars disappear completely, he wants to ask if she'll let him touch them again. He worries that it will sound as if he's using her scars as an excuse to grope her. Tomoyori is visibly confused and asks whether that's exactly what Mamoru means. Mamoru denies it, but Tomoyori becomes even more puzzled and asks if Mamoru is actually more interested in touching Sachi's scars than in touching Sachi herself. In another extra, Sachi and Mamoru discuss her healing scars again in Tomoyori's room. Mamoru says Tomoyori gave him a weird look. Sachi then says she has already told Akemi about that, while Akemi still doesn't understand why the scars matter so much. So they agree to keep it between themselves. Even as her scars heal, the subject comes up again. Sachi jokes that she's so clumsy. She will probably get new scars anyway. She then reveals a large scar underneath her dress and asks Mamoru if he wants to touch it. As he hesitates, Tomoyori unexpectedly walks in, says, "Excuse me?" tells Akemi that nobody is inside, and leaves while Mamoru tries to explain that it isn't what it looks like. Love at First Sight also references a feeding fetish, another recurring theme that appears throughout some of his works. This isn't the first time we've seen this pattern. In Teaching Feeling, there is even a dedicated scars option in the touch menu, and touching Sylvie's scars increases affection, just like kissing. Earlier, Sachi was called a monster because of her appearance, but by the end, I personally think it raises a better question. What really makes someone a monster? The way they look or the way they treat others? Determinable, unstable. Since this game lets you name the player, I'll be calling him X. The story begins with X visiting his grandmother's grave. On his way home, he walked through a nearby forest, remembering the days they used to explore nature together. Lost in those memories, he wanders too deep into the woods. By the time he realizes he's lost, the sun is already beginning to set. As panic sets in, X searches for a way out. Pushing through the bushes, he suddenly comes face to face with a creature that almost looks human. Before X can react, the creature transforms into a more terrifying form and lunges straight at him. The moment X sees the creature, he turns and runs, too terrified to look back. He keeps running until he runs out of breath due to his lack of training. When he finally dares to look behind him, he realizes the creature isn't chasing him. Back home, he tries to make sense of what happened. He remembers old stories about strange creatures living deep in the forest, but convinces himself they were probably just ghost stories. The next morning, he can't stop thinking about the creature. Although it looked terrifying, it also seemed strangely human. He wonders if it might actually be intelligent enough to communicate. And once again, he assumes she's not very intelligent. Despite everything, X decides to return to the forest. He convinced himself that the creature didn't seem hostile. He questions whether the creature's sudden movement was actually an attack. So what were the swords for? Believing he managed to escape once already, X assumes he could simply run away again if things went wrong. X returns to the same spot in the forest and finds the creature waiting exactly where they first met. This time, instead of running away, he stands his ground. He tells the creature that he isn't hostile. For a brief moment, it stops as if it understood him, but then it slowly approaches him. As it raises one of its massive arms, X tries to step back, trips over a tree root, and falls. The creature's arm crashes into the ground right beside him, close enough to prove that a direct hit would have been devastating. Rather than panicking, X starts thinking about what just happened. He realizes the creature reacted when he spoke, suggesting it understood his voice. Its movements also seem unusually slow, making him wonder if the creature is moving that way on purpose. To X's surprise, the creature finally speaks, confirming that she can communicate. She recognizes him from the previous day and asks why he came back. When X says he only wants to talk, she refuses, knocks him to the ground with another warning strike, and tells him not to return before disappearing into the forest. Even after returning home, X can't stop thinking about the encounter. Convinced she was only trying to keep people away rather than kill them, he decides to visit the forest one more time. This time, she doesn't attack. Instead, she says she expected him never to return, but now she's become curious. She adds, I also have some things I want to learn about. As they continue talking, she asks X to promise that this will be his last visit. Otherwise, she warns that she won't let him leave next time. Wouldn't your death be regrettable? Fear asks why X keeps coming back and what people know about her and the forest. Also wondering if there's anyone else like her in this world. X tells her he's never heard of anyone like her. Before they part ways, Fear asks one final question. People sleep at night? After hearing his answer, Fear says, come again, let's talk some more. The next day, X returns to the forest once again. This time, Fear is wearing a red dress connected to her time in the underground lab. X also noticed that she's speaking much more naturally, explaining that she's been reading books and copying the way a doctor she once knew used to speak. Curious, X asks about the doctor. Fear remembers very little, only that he gave her a job and later disappeared. Even after his disappearance, she continues carrying out the task he gave her, preventing whatever lies beyond this area from reaching a certain place. As their conversations continue, Fear gradually becomes more comfortable around X. Curious about his life, she asks where he lives and whether he has any family or close friends. Relieved to learn that he lives alone, she feels more confident that he will be able to keep her existence a secret. When X asks why she finally wanted to talk to him, Fear explains that she trusts him not to break his promise. She also realized that avoiding people was preventing her from understanding the outside world, so she decided to start learning for herself. Eventually, X asks who she really is. Fear doesn't know the answer herself. She believes she's probably not human, but spending time with X has changed the way she sees the outside world. For the first time, she begins thinking about leaving the forest behind. With the doctor gone, she no longer feels tied to the task he gave her and starts wondering if she can finally live a different life. Fear explains that she won't stay in the forest forever, wanting to learn about the outside world while hiding her true identity. She accepts X's offer to stay at his house temporarily, where she can learn from the many books left behind by his grandfather. Even so, she warns X that living with her could be dangerous. If someone attacks her, she will defend herself, even if she never intends to hurt anyone. As Fear learns about everyday life, X introduces her to different foods, fruits, and seasonings. She compares every taste and texture she experiences. She discovers that sugar is delicious, dislikes plain salt, and gradually learns how humans describe different flavors. X notices that Fear's appearance and the way she speaks are beginning to change. She explains that, just as she can reshape her body, she's also trying to adapt the way she talks to better fit human society. As Fear becomes more familiar with humans, the game unlocks a customization menu. Rather than being just a cosmetic feature, it reflects her ability to reshape herself while adapting to human society. You can adjust both her appearance and the way she speaks, making it feel like a natural extension of the story. She spends more time reading and eventually notices that telling fiction apart from lies isn't always easy. While fantasy is easy to recognize, fictional countries or historical events often send her back to dictionaries to check whether they are real. When X asks about her past, Fear remembers very little. She believes she may have lived in the mansion near the forest, with an underground lab hidden beneath it. She also finds it strange that she never learned to read or write from him. As Fear shares her thoughts on the different foods she tries, X calls her cute. Fear asks whether that was a joke or sarcasm, explaining that she's still learning the difference, even though her own explanation is completely accurate. The game also includes a cheap bonus showing a relevant suggestive image. Surprisingly, that's where the pilot version ends. As far as I could find, the full version has never been publicly released, so it's unclear whether development is still active. There is also an alternative path. If X refuses to make the promise, Fear immediately knocks him unconscious, leading to an eerily bad ending. The story begins with the player X inheriting an old house from a distant relative. While exploring the property, he discovers a hidden basement and a strange symbol hidden behind a shelf. The moment he places his hand on it, everything changes. He is pulled into another place, where he encounters a mysterious creature named Noxia, who begins speaking about rituals, sacrifices, and an evil celestial being. Before continuing, she allows him to ask a few questions about the strange world. What is the ritual? What is the price? And who performed the ritual? And who is the evil celestial being? Rather than making a wish right away, X decides to investigate first. Noxia agrees, explaining that her knowledge is limited to the time when the ritual was created, not the modern world. Together, they return to the old house to search for answers. Back in the house, X asks Noxia about her identity, daily life, and what she would need while they investigate the ritual. Noxia explains that her needs differed from those of humans and agrees to help X investigate the ritual. The two agree to use the old house as a temporary base while keeping Noxia hidden from the outside world. To help her understand the modern age, X finds a collection of old school books left behind by the previous owner. Before leaving to deal with the inheritance paperwork, Noxia asks a few questions to make sure she can trust him. After dealing with the papers, X returns home to find Noxia studying the old school books, trying to understand the modern world. That evening, they share their first meal together, giving Noxia her first taste of ordinary human life. From this point, the game shifts into a slice of life routine, with X teaching Noxia about the modern world, while new conversations and events gradually unlock over time. After the introduction, the game shifts away from survival and focuses on building a relationship. New discussions unlock almost every week, while the player is often asked to evaluate Noxia's appearance, personality, and everyday behavior. Over the next few weeks, Noxia gradually adapts to modern life. She learns about cars, the internet, films, and eventually starts helping around the house. As time passes, the investigation slowly uncovers more about Varnell. Though many mysteries remain unsolved, new visitors from Noxia's world arrive, expanding the story beyond the house. The authorities allow her to stay under supervision, while the two continue searching for a safer way to replenish her mana. Eventually, they succeed in finding a safer way to replenish her mana, avoiding the risks of blood feeding. With that, the optional conversations come to an end. They don't change the main story, but they expand the world's lore and help us understand Noxia far better. From this point on, however, the story takes a much darker turn. One of the darker endings reveal Noxia's true nature. I made a connection here with Doki Doki Literature Club, where seemingly harmless choices can lead somewhere much darker. If X focuses too much on blood-related choices instead of everyday life conversations, she kills him without hesitation. Another project is Lemonade. Although little is known about it, the available artwork continues his signature style, featuring unsettling designs and physical deformities. Ray-Kbys also planned another visual novel called Courtship Dream. Its protagonist was Shizuko, and several promotional illustrations and character designs still exist today. However, the visual novel itself was never officially released. I've shown you the games and the illustrations across Ray-Kbys' works. The same themes appear again and again: isolation, dependence, and the blurred line between comfort and control. The evidence is now on the table. Whether these patterns were intentional or his storytelling style, I'll leave that for you to decide.